I found out the girl I hooked up with had a husband, so I left a sticky note under the toilet seat. This is one of the worst situations I've ever found myself in. I feel awful for what I've done and hope that the guy whose wife I hooked up with finds my note. I was out at the local bar by myself last Friday. I work construction and was there after a long day, so I still had some gear on me. This is important later. I wasn't really expecting to do anything, just hoping to unwind a bit, but there was this attractive girl who kept making eye contact with me throughout the night, so I decided to go up to her. She was pretty nice and wholesome, or so I thought, and I was enjoying myself throughout our conversation. I bought us a few drinks and she started to get more touchy as the night went on. I wasn't really in the mood for anything, but she actually suggested we go back to her place, and being a man, I wasn't going to miss an opportunity like that, so I said sure. I called an Uber back to her place, and in the ride home she continued to be touchy and we started making out. When we got to her place she poured up some wine, we conversed a bit longer, then things progressed quickly to her bedroom. Being quite intoxicated and now in the mood, I didn't see a certain picture on her dresser, that I'd live on to regret not noticing. We got busy in her bed and she seemed to really be into it. Afterwards, I was getting dressed and ready to head home when I saw something peculiar on her dresser. I had to rub my eyes to make sure I was seeing this correctly, but it was the girl I had just had intimacy with in a wedding gown leaning on what looked like her husband. I was shocked and looked back at the girl to make sure she wasn't watching me. She wasn't, so I looked at more of the pictures to clarify, and sure enough, there was another one of her kissing the same guy in another picture on a wedding altar, who I now confirmed to be her husband. My heart sunk to my stomach. I knew I had to do something, and in a split second, I remembered I still had some gear on me from work and decided to grab a sticky note from my pack, leave a note on it, and put it under their toilet seat hoping her husband would find it. I essentially said that I'm so sorry, but your wife just cheated on you with me. I thought I should let you know. I hope this reaches you. Again, so sorry. After I putting it under the toilet seat, I quickly grabbed my stuff and left.
Storytime about how I caught my dad watching me while I changed. I think he's trying to gaslight me. I need help. Disclaimer, this is not my storytime, it's sending me on Instagram. I'm 17 years old, about to turn 18. My parents got a divorce when I was 13. My mom caught him cheating on her over several times. And one of the times he even did it at home with some girl he met at a bar. Because of that, my mom told me not to ever trust him. But the way she would say things made me think that there was something else behind everything. After the divorce, my mom got full custody, thank God. This is when my mom told me that I needed to stay away from him. She told me that if I ever found myself alone with him, that I should just call her and tell her to pick me up. When I was 13, I never thought about it twice. After the divorce, my dad started dating a 19-year-old girl. Mind you, he was 46 at the time. When my mom found out, I remember she called him. She told him he was disgusting for dating someone that was 19. But my dad laughed on the phone and hung up on her. My mom didn't even know that I heard the conversation, but she had it on speaker, so I did. He did have rights to visitation though. So he would come over every Saturday and Sunday to visit me, but my mom never left us alone. But my dad has been giving me such weird vibes lately. When I bring it up to him, he says I'm hallucinating and imagining things. Part 2 is up. Storytime about how I caught my dad watching me change. I think he's trying to gaslight me. I need help. Disclaimers is not my storytime, it's sending me on Instagram. When I turned 15, I started growing more into my body. My boobula started growing in a little more. This is when I noticed that my dad would look at me a lot more when he would come over to visit me. But like I said, my mom never left us alone. This is also around the time that my dad started asking me if I was interested in boys, and that if I ever let a boy touch me before. But it's the way that he said it. It wasn't like in a fatherly way. It was in a gross, nosy way. As soon as he asked me that, my mom told him to stop talking to me like that. And she answered for me. She said, of course she doesn't let boys touch her. What do you expect? My dad laughed and said, okay, fine. Just making sure. I was completely grossed out by my own father. Ew. When I turned 16, my mom started letting me date, and this boy I really liked actually asked me out. I was really excited. I mean, he said he wanted to meet my mom. He came over on a Saturday and my mom made lunch for us. We had a really great time, but then my dad knocks on the door. By the way, he told us that he wasn't going to be able to come, which is why my mom invited my boyfriend in the first place. As soon as my dad comes in, he started acting jealous. Part 3 is up. Storytime about how I caught my dad watching me change. I think he's trying to gaslight me. I need help. Disclaimers are now my storytime is sending me on Instagram. That's when my dad started acting all jealous when he saw my boyfriend. He took my mom into another room and said that I shouldn't have a boyfriend and that I was too young and that he would take advantage of me. But my mom stood her ground. She asked him politely to leave and he did. The following Saturday, my dad comes over to visit again. This time I was in my room changing. My mom told him that I was in my room changing, but she went to the kitchen. Obviously, this is when my dad comes upstairs. The door was slightly open and he could see inside. I was finishing putting on a t-shirt, and when I turn around, there he is looking. I screamed and told him that he scared me, and I told him, why are you watching me change? He said, you're crazy, I wasn't doing that. I said, yes you were, I just saw you. I was so weirded out. After he left, I asked my mom why she never leaves me alone with him. That's when she told me that he was accused of SAing an underage girl. So I told my mom what happened. That's when she said he's never coming back to this house again. Now my dad is gaslighting both me and my mom. He even called me a liar and that I'm making it up. But my mom, of course, believes me. What should we do? Story time about the day my husband attacked me and put me in the hospital. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it's sending me on Instagram. My husband and I had been married for 7 years. 3 years into the marriage, he started sleeping on the couch. We would constantly fight back then because of several things. Number 1, I knew he was cheating on me, but he would never admit to it. Number 2, I wanted to have children, but he didn't want to at the time. Number 3, he never wanted to spend time with me and always prioritized his friends. And this was around the time that he started getting physically violent. Because we'd already been married for a few years at that point, I never saw him as a violent person. It all started by him shoving me one time during an argument. But he shoved me so hard I fell to the ground and ended up bruising my chin. And even though this was a big problem between me and him, it became an even bigger problem between me and my family. As soon as my parents saw the bruise, they started accusing him of beating me. And of course, my first instinct was to defend my husband. My parents begged me to stay with them and I didn't. I went back to my husband and demanded an apology, but he wouldn't even look me in the face. He told me he basically did not care. Once he started sleeping on the couch, it was just like we were roommates. We stayed like this for years. Anytime we got into an argument, he would just look for something to throw at me. One day he threw a jewelry box at me and I ended up in the ER. And of course the hospital thought it was my husband. So I lied and said that I tripped. And unfortunately, I went straight back to my husband. Part 2 is story time about the day my husband attacked me and put me in the hospital. Disclaimer, it's not my story time, it's sending me on Instagram. After years of him pushing me, shoving me, throwing things at me, and even slapping me, I became so numb to it. It would get me really angry and upset at the moment, but as soon as he would apologize, we would just go back to normal. But even our normal wasn't normal. We didn't sleep in the same bed. He was never really home, and when he was always playing video games. This was also around the time that he lost his job. So for 5 years, I was basically the breadwinner. He told me he didn't want to get a job and he wanted to play video games. I didn't tell him anything because I didn't want it to turn into a fight. But I was angry at the thought that I had to now support him. But like I said, my parents did not like him at all. They knew something was up because I always had some sort of bruise. My parents made it a habit of showing up unannounced to our house. I was actually really grateful to my parents. This didn't upset me at all. But my husband, on the other hand, hated my parents. One day he asked me, why do they even care about you so much? You're not that important. Around a year ago, I started feeling really sick all the time. At the time, I didn't know why. One day, I walk into the kitchen and see my husband holding eye drops in his hand, but he quickly put it away. I asked him why he was holding them. He said nothing, mind your own business. So I did. A few months later, I'm having a conversation with a coworker, and he told me a story about somebody using eye drops on someone else to make them sick. This is when it all clicked. I had all these weird stomach issues. And I never realized that it was him putting eye drops in my coffee. This is when I decided to file for divorce. Instead of filing for divorce and leaving him, I went home and told him that I was going to get a divorce. He grabbed a hammer and started chasing me. I locked myself in the bathroom. Part 3 is up. Story time about the day my husband attacked me and put me in the hospital. Disclaimer, is not my story time, it's sending me on Instagram. When I saw him grab the hammer, I started instantly running. I ran straight to the bathroom and locked myself. The good thing is that he would never damage this house because he does love it, so he didn't swing at the door. I stayed in the bathroom for an hour explaining to him why I wanted to get a divorce. After the 2 hours, I thought he had calmed down. He basically told me that he would give me the divorce with no problem. But let me remind you, I was the breadwinner and he had no job. He was completely dependent on me. But as soon as I opened the door, he pushed in and started hitting me. Unfortunately, I didn't tell anyone in my family what my plan was. Suddenly, I wake up and I realize I'm on the ground. 4 hours had passed. I get up and look at myself in the mirror and my face was completely swollen. I walk into the living room and my husband was there playing video games, just like he did every day all day. As soon as he sees me, he says, "You better go wash your face." Instead, I grabbed my things and ran out. He didn't even bother chasing me. I called my parents on the way to the hospital and they met me there. Luckily, there was no major damage. My parents helped me file a police report, and when the police showed up to see my husband, he had cleaned the bathroom. Guess what he told them? That he was the one that wanted to divorce me because I was crazy, and that I had made up the whole attack. He says that I must have hit myself in the face. That's when the cops asked him, "How do you know that she was hit in the face?" Gotcha. He said he had assumed that I was being hit in the face. My brothers and parents went over and kicked him out. I sold the place and bought a house down the street from my parents. I am now so much happier. I feel like I'm aging backwards from not being around him. The constant feel and nervousness I felt around him took a toll on me, and I just hadn't realized it. To this day, he says he did nothing, and the cops have done nothing against him. I need proof, so what should I do?
Am I in the wrong for kicking my pregnant daughter out and changing the locks on her and my husband? Okay, so I, 47 female, found out earlier today that my daughter, 19 female, let's call her Jane, and my husband, 53 male, John, have been sleeping together since her 18th birthday. She's pregnant, but not by him. The whole situation is even worse since she's in a long-term relationship with her boyfriend of 4 years. It was around 2 in the morning when I found out that Jane and John had been sleeping together when I went through his phone. I had seen explicit text messages and photos dating back to over a year ago. As soon as I saw those, I woke my husband up and started screaming. He was denying everything, so I went into my daughter's room and woke her up. She admitted to everything and said that they've been in a romantic relationship since she was 18. I couldn't talk. I didn't know what to do. I stood there for about 2 minutes before I spoke a word. The only thing that I said was, "Both of you pack your bags and get the fuck out. If you're not out in 30 minutes, I'm calling the cops." And watched as they packed their things and left. The next morning after they left, I went to the store and got what I needed to change the locks. Both of them have tried coming back and I won't answer the door. I'm getting texts from my husband's family and they're calling me a whole bunch of names and saying that I'm wrong for kicking them out. Everyone's saying how I should at least not let my daughter back in the house until she can live on her own because she's pregnant. Should I let her back in? Am I in the wrong for kicking her out?
Do I tell a woman her husband has been cheating on her with me? So this happened last month where I met a guy online and we clicked instantly. We ended up meeting at a private location where we talked and ended up having sex unprotected. We kept talking about a week later and he came to my apartment where we had unprotected sex again. We mutually told each other that we had feelings and wanted a relationship. He revealed that he was married and that his wife is pregnant. I can confirm that she is. We immediately cut things off and I was super hurt and distraught. I wanted closure and an explanation, so we had a phone call where he told me where he was at in his relationship. He said he loved his wife and kids, but only cheated because things have been hard. He did genuinely feel guilt and remorse, I could tell. He told me that if his wife found out, he'd lose his kids, which was his biggest fear. I told him I wouldn't say anything because my mom cheated on my dad, and it ruined my life. So this couldn't be my job to do that. I don't want to do this to a family, but at the same time, it would kill me to know that my husband cheated on me with an 18-year-old while I was pregnant. So what I'm wondering is, do I message his wife, or do I leave it alone and forget that this chapter of my life ever happened? My entitled sister-in-law wants custody of my baby. I, 36 female, have been married to my sister-in-law's 40 female brother for over 10 years, and there's always been some jealousy and resentment from her. She's always felt like I had the life she wanted. Not necessarily with her brother, but the marriage, family, job stability, etc. I have 3 kids, 10 female, 8 male, 3 months female. She got married last year and they decided to start trying for a baby, but she was unfortunately told that she can't have children naturally. She was understandably devastated and the family comforted her as best as we could. We recently had a family dinner and in the middle of it she says, "Hey, I think it's really unfair that you got to have 3 kids and I can't have any. Your baby is my last chance to raise a kid, so I think you should give her to me during the week so I can create a motherly bond with her, and you can have her on the weekends." Before I could even respond, the entire table erupted with everyone talking at once, so I took my older kids upstairs. When I got back to the dining room, her husband was asking what the hell is wrong with her and why she would even think to ask that. She was trying to justify herself when I asked them to leave. I also said that she's no longer welcomed at my house or around my children until she gets help. She started screaming that I don't deserve my life or my children and that I stole her baby from her. Her husband and mother-in-law kept apologizing and dragged her out of the house, still crying and screaming. Now my kids want to know why their aunt wants to take the baby. We have a security system and cameras already installed and no one has keys to her house. I will not be able to get a restraining order as this one incident isn't enough to justify it. My husband and I spoke to the older kids about it the same night and will be having another talk with them to reinforce that sister-in-law is not a safe person anymore. I'll also be informing the school and daycare of the issue and giving them her photo. My entitled sister-in-law wants custody of my baby. Part 2. My sister-in-law has been admitted to a psychiatric facility. After the incident, her husband sought out a psychiatrist rather than a counselor, and they had their first session last week. I didn't get the specifics of what happened, but basically she made some statements that the psychiatrist felt indicated that she was a danger to others, my baby and me, and she was placed under an involuntary hold. My brother-in-law has been nothing but apologetic throughout this whole entire ordeal, and he kept her away from us since the incident. Mother-in-law was staying with them to keep an eye on sister-in-law. She also tried to leave the house in the middle of the night to see her baby. Also, brother-in-law found her researching how to induce lactation, and she said it was to make sure she can feed the baby properly when I come to my senses and give her up. From what brother-in-law has said, seeing me breastfeed is apparently what triggered the entire episode. It was the first time sister-in-law was around the baby for any length of time, and she was holding her when she got fussy because she was hungry. Naturally, I took her to feed her, and this made sister-in-law feel inadequate because it triggered the thought that she would never be able to do that, which led to the events of the last post. I'm grateful for all the advice that was offered on my last post, as some of it was really helpful. We won't be moving as it's not feasible for us at the moment, but we have taken extra steps with security both at home and at this kid's school and daycare. This whole thing is taking a toll on the family, but mother-in-law, father-in-law, and brother-in-law are taking care of sister-in-law, and my husband and I are focused on ensuring the safety of our immediate family and minimizing the effects on the kids as much as we can. My wife is addicted to making up Reddit stories for TikTok and is ruining this marriage. My wife of 3 years, age 25, has been constantly on Reddit and TikTok for the past 8 months to the point where they both take up anywhere from 9 to 13 hours of her battery usage. She got into them heavily after I sent her one, and it just spiraled to the point where she is writing her own for clout, I guess. 2 of them that I know she wrote herself were about a man whose dad thought he was cheating on his boyfriend and cut him off for a year, then coming back begging to reconcile. One that she showed me she wrote earlier tonight, where a 43-year-old woman found her husband cheating with their 20-year-old stepdaughter. What the actual fuck, by the way. That one she posted and has already gained so much traction that it'll probably be on TikTok by morning. We work at the same company, and she has gotten written up for being on her phone multiple times to the point where she might get fired. I've tried to get her to go to therapy because a lot of these are disturbing scenarios she's writing about, but she says it's just a creative outlet. I'm worried for her, and honestly, if she doesn't quit, I'm most likely going to separate from her, as she's shown me such a dark and twisted side of her mind through these.